This is the ComMarker Omni 1 5-watt UV laser, and it has genuinely changed the way I think about lasering. Here are 3 reasons why. Number 1, I am used to lasers generating heat and burning whenever they are working. However, this does everything cold, which sounded alien to me at first, but genuinely you don't get burn marks, you don't get scorching on the edge of your material. You just get beautiful, crisp, clean engravings and cuttings whenever you are using it. Number 2, the laser on this is so fine. We are talking precision and detail that you need a microscope to see. The quality that you can get from photo engravings with this is a level of quality I didn't think I would ever get from a desktop laser. And number 3, because of the 2 previous points that I have just mentioned, it actually means that this can laser pretty much anything. Anything you can put your hands on in your workshop, I promise, this can probably laser it. Now, don't just take my word for it. Stick with me for the next few minutes and I'm going to show you my experience with the ComMarker Omni 1. So let's start right at the beginning. As I've experienced previously with ComMarker lasers, they are packaged very well. Double boxed, reinforced corners and a whole bunch of foam to make sure that everything is thoroughly protected. Well, unless you've got one of those couriers that treats it like a grenade and just literally throws your parcel at your house. Now, when you come to unbox everything, obviously take everything out, the core components of the machine is essentially 3 parts. This base, the tower and the UV unit itself. Now, assembling this is a very easy process. It is literally 8 bolts, 4 for the tower and 4 to hold the UV base onto the tower itself. Now, when you come to mount this, there is quite a lot of weight in this UV unit, so maybe get someone to help you or find a way to support it, because as I say, this part here is, well, where all the special things happen within the laser, so you want to make sure that is secured very well when you start working with it. When you come to power it up, there are 2 power buttons, one at the front and one at the side of the laser here. Now, ultimately, you power up the unit and then you power up the laser second. Now, when you do come to do this, the laser does take a good 1 to 2 minutes to warm up before you can start using it. And this little power button will blink, and when it goes solid, it means it's good to go. So after the physical build is done, it's time to move on to your PC or laptop. Now, there are primarily 2 pieces of software that people use to run machines like this. One is called EasyCAD, which is free software. Another one is called Lightburn, which is paid for software. Now, I do believe Lightburn is well worth the money. It is my software of choice, but they do give you the EasyCAD option should you want to start on the free side of it. Now, all these settings for the laser do come on the USB stick that they provide with it. However, I did notice a little discrepancy in some of the parameters on this USB stick. When you load in the settings, it caps the speed of this machine to 7,000 millimeters per second. However, on their website, they advertise it as being able to run at 10,000 millimeters per second. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a phenomenally fast speed, and you probably wouldn't even be able to engrave anything at that. But it did make me question, why would they cap 30% of the top speed off? As I say, there is that discrepancy, and as the user, we can go in and override those settings. But I also did notice another discrepancy. The frequency for this loads in at a minimum of 1, a maximum of 40. They told me it was 30 to 150. Now, I did put the question to ComMarker as to why there is a difference, and I am awaiting an answer, but for now, let's move on. In the box, you do get additional accessories and a materials pack. The materials pack is great to get you started, and I'll talk more about this the further I go into the video. But as part of the accessories, you do get some essential things like protective eyewear. Now, one of the nice things is this has been upgraded since previous lasers that I've had from ComMarker, and they now put the rating of the lasers on the glasses on the lens. I will get that sentence out. Now, one accessory that you may not have seen before is this green looking fluorescent ping pong paddle thing right here. Now, probably the only downside to a UV laser is that when you come to frame your materials, which is when it shines a very thin light around the area it's expected to engrave, on this it is more difficult to see. It will only show up on certain materials or certain colours, and ultimately this is there to help you. So what you do is, before you're about to start engraving, you place this over the top to see where it is framing, and then you just know it's in the right position, or you can correct it. Now, as I say, this is a little bit of a pain, and there are workarounds for it, such as certain types of highlighter pens that will show it up. But ultimately, once you get into the habit of using it, it does become second nature just to pick it up, check the framing, move it back out and carry on. Now at the start of the video I touched on 3 things that have changed the way I think about things, or 3 benefits to this laser, and the first was obviously it can engrave cold. This is called cold marking. Now the reason it does this is obviously the wavelength of the laser, which is 355 nanometers. Now without turning this into a science lesson, in its simplest form this is sort of at the opposite end of the light spectrum to where things like fiber lasers sit, so therefore it impacts the material differently. And some people may be thinking, well, a 5-watt laser doesn't sound that powerful, and you sort of are right. It is not that powerful compared to some things like a 60-watt fiber laser, but because of the way it impacts that material and almost affects it in a different way, it doesn't need to be as powerful to get very similar results. And when it is doing its cutting and engraving, because it's not generating the same amount of heat as other lasers, it's not as destructive, and this is one of the reasons you get much cleaner results from it. The next benefit that I mentioned was the precision of this laser, or how fine that laser beam is. Now it's officially listed as being 0.001 millimeters. Now I have no way of actually being able to check that, but what I am able to do is some comparisons between my UV laser and my 60-watt fiber laser. Now I'll put the results on screen. I should highlight I was still playing about with the settings on the UV laser at this point, so it's not a perfect line, but you can see it is at least half, if not 1/3 of the thickness of the fiber laser line. Now what does that actually mean in reality? Well, it means when you're doing text, you can make it tiny. I got as small as 0.2 millimeters and it was still just about legible. When you take into account the smallest text the naked eye can read is about 0.6 millimeters, and this is 1/3 of that, it really is tiny and you need a magnifying glass to read it. It also means that when you come to do things like photo engravings, the quality that you can get in it, it's almost like having an actual print of a photograph. It is so crystal clear. Obviously, as long as the photos have been processed correctly, but it is going to retain all the detail that you would expect from an original photograph. And the third benefit I mentioned was basically how versatile this is, the fact it can laser pretty much anything you can put your hands on. Now, as I said, that is a combination of the wavelength and how precise that laser beam is, because it almost deals with things a lot more delicately, and as I said, is a lot less destructive in the way that it engraves and cuts. Now, just as a perfect example of this, one of my first tests on glass, you can see how clean this is versus a test from a CO2 laser also engraving glass, which looks more cracked and rougher edges. Now the quality on the glass, the only thing I could think of that could possibly beat this is something like sandblasting. I'm not even sure that would. It is a very professional finish from this type of engraving. Now, one of the hardest things to learn about any new laser is understanding the settings to get the desired results that you're after. But it's good to understand how a UV laser actually works. Now, there are different parameters that you can adjust. On a UV laser, it is the speed, the pulse rate, and the frequency. Now, you may notice I didn't mention power there. The UV laser cannot have its power adjusted, and it will essentially just be grayed out in your software. Now, if you're unsure what frequency or Q pulse means, don't worry, I was when I first got started. I will be posting an article on my website breaking it down into more simplified detail, but I suppose the easiest way to think about it is the frequency is the amount of bursts of light that are coming from the laser itself, and the Q pulse is the intensity of those bursts of light. Now you can see this when you zoom in detail on those particular lines, and you start to see the little dots of the laser itself. Let's move on to the fun stuff, actually using your laser. Now in the kit itself you will get a materials package that has a whole variety of things, and this is a great place to start because it gives you different types of material to begin testing with. Also on the USB stick there is a material library that you can load into your software, which gives you some very basic settings to get started. Now what I would say is use those as a principal starting point, but don't necessarily rely on them. And I always do material tests on pretty much anything that I'm working on, just so I understand how it's going to interact with that material. And I really can't exaggerate that point enough. Do material tests on nearly everything. Either photograph them or store them somewhere, and it will give you a brilliant reference for any time you need to work on that type of material. What materials can this laser work with? Well, how much time do you actually have? This is probably one of the most versatile lasers that I have ever seen. We're talking all of your different common types of materials. Obviously I've already shown wood. It's going to do all your different types of metals that you would expect your aluminiums, your steels, your titaniums. It will do pretty much any type of plastic, including 3D printed objects. When you see tools that have been branded, this is often the type of laser that I will use to apply that branding to them. It can do things such as your leathers. It will work on materials like denim and cotton. It will even work on your clear materials such as glass and acrylic. Now, one thing I will point out is that not everything I did was a success, and that is why I'm referencing at the point of the acrylic. Now, there are two different types of acrylic. There is extruded and there is cast. I had good results on the extruded acrylic, but bad results on the cast acrylic. Now, the differences between them usually is the melting point, so maybe I needed to dial my settings in a little bit more. I don't know. Obviously, these type of reviews are normally done under condensed time frames, and there's probably a whole bunch of materials that I've forgotten, like stones and ceramics, but there is a full list of things that it can handle on the ComMarker website. But the bottom line is that pretty much anything you own, this is going to be able to engrave. And going back to what I said earlier, because of the way it engraves with that cold marking, you don't have to be worried about doing more delicate items. For example, you can engrave the back of your phone without worrying about damaging the components inside of it. You can engrave your tools, you can engrave your laptop. The options and availability is honestly endless in what you can do. There are two lenses that come with the machine. One is a 150mm lens and the other is a 70mm lens. Now, this basically refers to the work area that you can actually operate in. A 150mm lens, 150 square millimeters to work in. Same thing with the 70mm one. The other thing to point out about the lenses as well is the 70mm one will have finer results, but the downside to that is the focal range is less. So you've really got to be in the sweet spot when focusing that on the 70mm lens, where you will have a slightly broader window using the 150mm. Now, when you come to change them over, there is a housing that goes around the lens itself. Now, if you take it out, this should just unscrew and can be transferred over to the other lens, or alternatively try and leave this in place and just unscrew the lens from the actual housing itself. The other thing I noticed is there is a slight colour difference between the two lenses. The 150mm lens seems to have much more of a yellow tint to it than the 70mm lens, which is more clear. There is still a very slight yellow tinge to it, but it is obviously a lot less stronger than the 150mm one. I don't know if this is just the lenses I have or if there's a purpose behind this, but it was an observation. Now, whilst I'm talking about focal lengths, obviously it does vary between each lens, but they do tell you the depths for each lens. Initially, your laser will come with a 150 lens fitted, and the measurement for this is on the side of the unit with a little yellow sticker. You can use the ruler provided to the bottom of that sticker, and that gives you the correct focal length for the 150mm lens. With the 70mm lens, they actually write the focal length of that one in the instruction booklet that comes with it. So don't discard it like a lot of people do, because the focal length for that lens is in there. An additional accessory that comes with the machine is this lifting table. Now, the reason for this is when you are using the 70mm lens, this can't come down low enough to be able to work on the bed itself, basically because of this support bracket here at the back. So what you have to do is lift the material up to reach the focal point for the lens. This is a little bit of a pain when you've got something like a fixed dust extraction in like I have here, but ultimately that is what you do, is bring the material up to the lens as opposed to lowering the lens down to it. Now, as with other ComMarker Galvo lasers, when you are adjusting the focal length, there are up and down buttons on the front of the unit, or you can do this by hand with the knob at the top of the tower to raise it up and lower it down. So I've shown and spoke about how versatile this laser is, but who is it not for? Well, it is probably not for those wanting to do deep engravings into metal. If you're looking at doing things like coins, engraving knives, maybe even stamps, those type of elements, this is not the one for you. You should look more at the fibre lasers that I previously reviewed. And the difference ultimately is they're much more aggressive in the way that they will laser away the metal itself. Whereas I've said this is a more delicate process for doing it. It will still engrave metal, as I've already shown, it just won't do it in the same way that a fibre laser does. Now, obviously I can't do a review without talking about the price. I'm not going to say this is a cheap laser. It is still $4,000 at the end of the day. It's a big chunk of money to come out of your pocket. But it is cheap in comparison to where UV lasers are, where they have been for the last few years. Now, when you think about the versatility of this, obviously it can do a lot of materials, and it can do a lot of materials almost at professional level quality. So the chances of you recovering the cost of this laser are obviously much higher given what it can do. Now, obviously the question will get asked, what would I go for, a UV laser or a fibre laser, because I do have both. As it stands at the moment, a lot of people have fiber lasers and they're doing very similar things with them, and it's almost flooding the market with those type of products. So at this time, I would probably go towards the UV laser because I think it's going to open a lot of doors that haven't yet been filled or oversaturated by the market. You can do some really cool things with this that obviously a fiber laser cannot do. And just to cover off the YouTube trolls, yes, ComMarker did send me this machine. No, they haven't paid me to do the review. And if you have any doubts about the integrity of my reviews, I do have a policy on my website that's publicly available that all manufacturers have to agree to before sending me any machines to ensure a fair review for the viewers. And that is my overview and review of the ComMarker Omni 1 UV laser. Now there will be links down below if you are interested in this laser. Obviously they will always take you to the best available price. If you do have any questions, then let me know in the comment section down below. I will do my best to answer. And I'm also going to try and do some more videos showing practical use of this as opposed to a condensed test like I have done in this video. So I do hope you've enjoyed it. Of course, if you did, thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you all very much for watching. Final thanks as always goes to my patrons, and I will see you all on the next episode.